So, the case of the kidnapped candy. This chapter 9 is irresistible. I cornered Joey on the playground. He was dribbling a big rubber ball. "Where's the candy?" I asked before he could say anything. The ball dribbled away. Joey froze. He stared at me with his mouth wide open. Nothing strange about that. Joey's mouth is always wide open. Of course, it's usually full of food. I knew I'd found the candy thief. "Lucy told me everything," I said. Joey shrugged. "Great. Then you know I just took one piece. Lucy and I agreed to keep it a secret, but I knew you'd believe us." "Just one piece?" I repeated. I had a funny feeling in my stomach, and it wasn't because I'd swallowed a whoopee cushion. Joey was my friend, but I didn't believe him. That funny feeling was doubt. After all, someone had to have taken the candy, and all signs pointed to Joey. Joey eats when he's nervous. He eats when he's happy. He eats when he's upset, and when he's tired, and when he's bored, and whenever you put food in front of him. This time he had been alone in a room with a chocolate-filled gumball machine. Could he really have just walked away? "Okay, so you just took one piece," I said. "How did you know it was there?" "Oh, I didn't look under the sheet," he said quickly. "Miss Gleason told us not to, remember?" I nodded. I remembered. It was starting to seem like I was the only one who did. "I overheard Eddie telling a couple guys about it," Joey said. "Eddie?" "Yeah," Joey said. He threw his arms out to his sides. "I just couldn't resist, Jigsaw. I stuck my hand under the sheet and turned the lever. One kiss popped out. That's all I took. Honest." "Just one?" I asked. "Well," Joey rubbed the back of his neck. "Okay, two. Okay, three. But that's it. Really." But before he could ask anything else, Mila came up behind us. She slipped me a note. It was in code. It says, so there's spaces in funny places, but it says, "Mike Radcliffe is eating a chocolate bar." Right away, I figured out that she was using a space code. I just had to push some of the letters together and move some of them farther apart. It only took me a couple of minutes to solve the code. "Mike Radcliffe is eating a chocolate bar." "Is it true?" I asked Mila. "Is what true?" Joey asked. Mila just nodded and pointed toward the jungle gym. There was Mike, stuffing his face, hanging out with Eddie Becker and Bobby Solovsky. I thought fast. Mike told me that he didn't like chocolate, and Bobby backed him up. Here was proof that they both were lying, and I had been so sure that Joey was the real thief. No wonder nothing added up about this case. It seemed like everyone in room 201 had forgotten how to tell the truth. "Let's go," I told Mila. "They've got some explaining to do." Chapter 10. Everybody Lies. As Mila and I walked up, Bobby Solovsky jumped off the jungle gym and put his fists on his hips. "No girls allowed," he said. "Chill out, Solovsky," I said. "We just want to ask Eddie something." Solovsky snorted. His tongue ran over his front teeth with a loud sucking sound. He doesn't sound like a very nice boy. He rolled his eyes. Then he jabbed his finger toward me. "You can do whatever you want, but she's gotta go." "Yeah," Mike yelled. "We're having an important meeting. No girls allowed." Mila shrugged and started to walk away, but I grabbed her arm. Mila and I were partners. I wasn't going to let some silly rule split us up. Besides, Mila wasn't just some girl. She was Mila. "If that's what you want," I said, "we'll both go. We should probably tell Miss Gleason what we just found out anyways." And I gave Mila the look. She got the idea. "Yes, she'll want to know about Eddie and the chocolate," she added quickly. "What about me and the chocolate?" Eddie asked. His eyes darted toward us. "Joey told us everything," I bragged. "We know you found out what was under the sheet, and you were probably the one who—" "It was Bobby!" Eddie cried. Solovsky whirled around and he glared at Eddie and growled. But Eddie didn't notice. He was too busy spilling the beans. "Bobby was bragging that he knew what was under the sheet," Eddie said. "I bet him that he didn't, so he told me about the gumball machine. I stared at Solovsky. If looks could freeze, he'd be a popsicle right now. I should have known it was him from the beginning. Don't look at me like that, Theodore, Solovsky said. I'm not the thief. You're right, I started to turn away. I knew he was lying. Solovsky had to be the candy napper. Ask Eddie when he took his last piece of candy, Bobby shouted. I stopped. I asked. Eddie said it was Thursday afternoon after school. The candy had turned up missing Friday morning. See, Solovsky said in triumph. I wasn't even there on Thursday afternoon. I went home early for a dentist appointment, so I can't be the thief. There was still candy in the gumball machine after I left. Mila frowned. He's right, Jigsaw. I remember he went home early. I scowled. Are you sure the candy was still there on Thursday? I asked Eddie. I didn't see it, he said. I just stuck my hand under the sheet and turned the lever, but a Hershey's Kiss popped right out, and it was definitely Thursday afternoon. Mila and I both sighed, and just like that, our case was blown wide open. I started to walk away.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Bless you.
But Mila stopped suddenly. One more question, Mila said. How did you find out about the candy? She asked Solovsky. Mike suddenly looked away. I remembered how he lied to us about not liking chocolate, and I was pretty sure I knew the answer to Mila's question. I found some kisses in Mike's backpack last week, Solovsky admitted. I made him tell me where they came from. Don't look at me like that, Jigsaw, Mike cried. I'm not the thief. I only took a couple pieces. That's it. Mike climbed up to the top of the jungle gym. He scanned the playground. Then he pointed toward the basketball court. I heard about the candy from Ralphie. Maybe he's the thief. Go ask him. Ralphie? It was starting to feel like everybody was a suspect. So, you know what I'm thinking right now? Everybody is admitting they each took a few pieces, right? So if everybody takes a piece or two, then everybody's the thief, and that's where it all went.
Yeah.
So Ralphie admitted that he knew about the candy too. He said he took one piece on Wednesday morning right before school. He heard about it from Kim Lewis, who heard about it from Helen Zuckerman, who heard about it from Danica Starling, who came to class early on Monday morning and saw Mrs. Gleason sneaking a piece of chocolate. We were a little closer to the truth, but we were still miles away from an answer. Chapter 11. Too many questions. I slumped down at the kitchen table. I glanced at the long list of suspects in my detective notebook. At this point, the only people who weren't suspects were the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy. Eesh! I had written down the name of almost everyone in room 201, but I still didn't know who the one true thief was. I didn't know anything for sure. None of the clues pointed to a definite candy napper. After all, it seemed like I had caught everyone lying at least once. Maybe they were still lying. Maybe Bobby, Mike, and Eddie were messing with me. Or maybe Joey took the candy and Lucy was covering for him. Or maybe Mila was right all along and Mrs. Gleason kept it for herself. Or maybe I had to lay my head down on the table and close my eyes. The case was giving me a giant headache. You know what else was giving me a headache? My brothers. Nick and Daniel were supposed to be washing the dishes, and they were, sort of. Mostly they were splashing soap bubbles at each other and yelling really loudly. They were arguing about basketball. In the winter, that's almost all they ever do. Sure, sometimes they watch basketball, sometimes they play it, but mostly they argue about it. The point guard is the most important position, Nick claimed, and he banged a pot into the sink. No, it's the center, Daniel argued. Every team needs a big guy to get rebounds and block shots. The point guard dribbles the ball, Nick countered. He makes passes and shoots from the outside. I groaned. Stop arguing, please. I pressed my hands over my ears. That's when my brothers noticed I was in the room. What do you think, Worm? Nick asked. Come on, tell him the point guard is the MVP. More like MVP ETC, Daniel snapped. Most valuable player except the center. Tell him, Shorty. Don't call me Shorty, I complained. Or Worm. Then I stopped talking and started thinking. Anything was better than worrying about the candy case. Nick was right. The point guard was important. He ran the offense, but so was the center, just like Daniel said. The team needed tall players, so who was the most valuable player? I suddenly remembered what Miss Gleason said about all the parts of the poem working together. I remembered Mr. Lorenzo giving everyone little jobs and turning our class into an orchestra. And just like that, I knew who had kidnapped the candy. I raced out of the room to call Mila. "Where are you going?" Nick called after me. "You didn't say who was right," Daniel yelled. "You both are," I called back, but I didn't stop to explain. I had a case to close. Should we finish I think chapter 12 is our last one. Yeah? Finish? We have 2 votes for yes. We'll finish it up quick. The blame game. The first thing in the morning, I asked Miss Gleason if I could say something to the class. "Did you solve the case, Jigsaw?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not yet, but I'm about to." Mila stood next to me. I was a little nervous. Then Mila winked at me, which helped. I was ready. "So, who done it?" Eddie Becker called out. "Theodore did," Solowski shouted. "Now he's going to confess." "Let Jigsaw talk," Miss Gleason said in a stern voice. "I think we all want to hear what he has to say." "This case took me a long time to solve," I told them. "It was tougher than month-old caramels. There were lots of suspects. Joey and Lucy were in the classroom alone. They could have—" "We didn't do it!" they cried together. And then there was Mike and Bobby who... Here, I'm going to pause for a second. Here, so... I think I can check. All right. And then there was Mike and Bobby who... "You can't pin this on me, Theodore," Bobby said angrily. "Like I said, I had a lot of suspects," I went on in a louder voice, "but none of them seemed quite right. Then I figured it out." They all stared at me, eyes wide. "Everybody close your eyes," I said. The whole class kept staring right at me. "Let's close our eyes now, class," Miss Gleason said. I gave her a grateful smile. You too, Miss Gleason," I said nervously. The class giggled. Miss Gleason looked confused, but she closed her eyes. I took a deep breath. "Now that everyone's eyes are closed, raise your hand if you snuck a piece of candy this week." No one moved. I glanced at Mila, alarmed. What if this didn't work? What if I was wrong? Then, very slowly, Danica Starling raised her hand. A moment later, Kim Lewis raised hers, then Lucy Hiller, Eddie Becker, Joey Pignatano, and more, until finally almost every kid had their hand up in the air. Even Mrs. Gleason's hand crept toward the ceiling. I knew it. "Open your eyes," I called out. Everyone's eyes shot open before their hands had time to come down. There was a moment of silence. The class was craning their necks around, looking to see whose hand was up. "Not just one person kidnaps the candy, Miss Gleason," I explained. "That was my mistake. I had started out looking for one thief when I should have been looking for many thieves. Everyone played a part in this crime. Everyone is a little bit guilty." "Even me," Miss Gleason said sheepishly. Miss Gleason was happy that we didn't have a thief in room 201. Well, she did. She had lots of them, didn't she? She said we had all learned our lesson, and as for me, I was happy too because the next morning Miss Gleason called me and Mila up to her desk. "Thank you for solving the case," she said. "I thought you two deserved a reward, especially since you never got any Hershey's Kisses." She handed us a giant box. Inside were 4 huge chocolate letters. LOVE. It could take us a month to eat all that chocolate, so we decided to get started right away. Mila sliced off a little piece of the V, and I nibbled on the edge of the L. I still say love stinks, but it sure tastes good.